Welcome to Lord of the Vets, where I've done the research so you don't have to. Don't talk to Dr. Google, you guys. Talk to a real one. So I'm here at Whiskeytown Lake in beautiful Northern California with the amazing Olivia, who is a dog trainer, and she absolutely loves dogs and she's very talented. And who are our friends here with us, Olivia?
I've got Lily, and then Cleo's right over there in the water.
So during this video, we're going to go through some basic training techniques for your dog, which Liv is going to demonstrate for us. We're going to go through the importance of setting up and establishing a line of communication with your dog. I'm going to talk about the importance of consistency and also positive and negative behavioral reinforcements. Olivia, how did you get into dog training, and tell me a bit about that?
You know, I think I first started getting interested in dog training when I met Lily, my first dog. She's 12.
Tell me, what are some of the first things you taught Lily how to do?
Well, it really started with, sitting before I fed her, or recall when I go outside and we lived on a big piece of property without fences and things like that.
Yeah. So when you say recall, do you mean teaching her to come back to you?
Yes.
Nice. And how did you do that?
Well, with Lily, it was more just guesswork. And with Cleo, I worked her on a leash for a while, and I'd call her in and treat her and call her in and treat her.
So how did you start training other people's animals?
I first started volunteering at the Humane Society here, and got into a program that they have called CGC, or Canine Good Citizen, where they train some of the more troubled shelter dogs that may have like dog aggression or just certain kinds of behavioral issues that make them difficult to adopt. But I started there, and then I was able to kind of meet people and build clientele and help them with their dogs and their behavioral issues.
Great. So, Liv, let's talk a bit about communication. So, something that's very common that I've experienced is people seem to think what they say is the most important thing with their dog, when the reality is the tone of your voice, your body language, and your behavioral interactions with the dog are actually far more powerful and more important than what people say. So what do you think about establishing this line of communication and the importance of it for owners and their dogs?
Well, first of all, I feel like over time, the reason dogs can learn our language, and they don't really learn it, is they're learning certain cues that we give them. And so being consistent with those cues. Tone is super, super important with your dogs, and also your hand signals and your behavior. If you're changing all the time, your dog is going to have a really hard time following you and understanding what you're trying to communicate. And they're always listening. They're always trying to figure out what you're telling them. And humans and dogs, have different languages, and you just kind of have to figure out how your dog talks, almost. And how to read them, and in turn they learn how to read you, and using a similar language as theirs is always better, and it makes the communication a lot better.
If one person in the family is communicating to the dog that it can't go up on the couch by pushing it down off the couch, and then an hour later another person in the family is communicating to the dog that it can come up and sit on your knee, and they're on the couch and they're going to pet it and cuddle it, that can be quite confusing for a dog. They're getting communicated two different things about the same topic, right?
Yeah, so a lot of times, dogs just really won't understand
Yes.
What's going on, and so when they do get up on the couch in that kind of situation, when they're not invited by the other family member, they're like, why am I in trouble? And it really is confusing for them.
So we can communicate with things like hand signals. So when we tell a dog to sit, not just saying sit, also incorporating a specific hand signal to that, right? My experience has been that dogs, they're actually more responsive to the visual signal than they are to the word sit. So I've seen owners tell a dog to sit in Chinese. The dog obviously doesn't know the Chinese word for sit, and use the hand signal, and the dog sits, and everyone thinks that, oh, this dog's so clever, it can speak 14 languages, and it's just responding to the hand signal.
Not at all, so if you think about it this way, dogs primarily use their body language to communicate with other animals.
Yes.
We tend to use our speech, but what we don't realize is we actually do use a lot of, our body language. When you do communicate with your animal, it's great to incorporate, like sit. there's so many different things you can do. This is what I do to have my dog sit.
Yeah.
Or if I want them to heel at my side, I'm down here. Or just to get their attention with a little bit of movement, because that's what their eyes pick up.
So we can communicate a lot to our dogs through our behavior, as well as through our tone, what we're saying, and our body language too. So if you give dog attention when the dog is doing a certain thing in the room, you're communicating to that dog that, oh, my owner likes this particular behavior. And if you're ignoring the dog when it's doing something else, the dog's sort of learning, oh, well, they're not that interested in me when I do this particular behavior. And that crosses over to certain desirable or undesirable behaviors like barking, jumping up. If a dog's jumping up and you reward it by giving it attention and holding its paws, you're signaling to that dog that, oh, this person or every person that comes into the house, they like it when I jump up and put my dirty paws on their nice white shirt.
Exactly.
And if somebody gives the dog like they put their knee out, they block the dog from jumping, they give it no attention when it's trying to do this behavior, that's communicating something else, that no, maybe actually people don't like it when I jump up. So it's really important that we communicate with our behavior as well as with our words.
And basically, what that means is you just want to reward the behavior that you want. So when you walk into a house and your dog is calm and greets you calmly and keeps all four paws on the ground, and you go sit down, you can do your own thing or whatever.
Yes.
And then when your dog is, when you feel like your dog is ready, and that's the exact behavior that you're asking of it when you walk into a room or when anybody walks into the room, then you can be like, good girl, or good boy, thank you.
So consistency. Let's talk about how important it is that the dog is getting consistent cues from every single person in the family, and not only that, but guests that are coming into the house. For a particular training method to work, it needs to be consistent, not only so that it's effective, but so that the dog learns to trust you and it learns to trust people, right? Because if a dog's getting all these different signals, it's just confusing and that can create anxiety. What would you say is the biggest hurdle you run into when you're training animals and there's multiple people in the family, or the dog's around a lot of different people? What are some of the challenges with that, Olivia?
Exactly the scenario that we've talked about already, but
with the dog jumping up.
The dog jumping up,
Right.
People like I personally enjoy it when my dogs jump on me. Other people don't think the same way, so I allow that behavior, but that also means that everybody else is going to get that same behavior, and which is why you can introduce cues that mean, okay, I want you to stay down right now, or I want you to jump up on me right now.
Yeah.
And you can actually train that. But for the most part, in a family with a lot of different people, children, things like that, you have to stay consistent, and you just have to set permanent boundaries. You don't want your dog to jump on you. You don't want your dog on the couch or in bed with you.
So you really need to get everybody on the same page. If you're going to train your dog effectively, everybody needs to be doing the same thing. You need to agree that this is the behavior we want in the dog and this is how we're going to do it together. And if someone's coming around, you need to tell them, this is how I want you to behave when my dog comes up to you. I want you to only pat him when he calms down or when she calms down. And if she does jump up, this is what I want you to do. So that eventually the dog you won't have to be so disciplined, because the dog will actually learn after a while how to act, because everybody's on the same page, right?
Definitely. Usually, like the ground rules that that I'll have people have in their homes is you just don't make eye contact with the dog. They're just zero engagement. Don't talk to it, and just you completely ignore it until you can have a conversation with the owner, about what what needs to be done. And I feel like that's kind of behavior everywhere. Like if you see a dog in public, don't engage with the dog. Talk to the owner first. Like look at the owner in the eyes and be like, hey, can I pet your dog? Is it okay if I say hi to him? Before you're like, hi puppy, and that makes it harder for people who are trying to work with their animals, or animals that aren't comfortable with people in public.
Yeah, you don't know the history of that dog. You don't know if it's coming from a rescue situation, its levels of anxiety or aggression. So what you said is very, very good and important, to actually engage the owner before just going straight up to dogs, because that's how you or your kid can get bitten, or you can reinforce behaviors that the owner doesn't want.
When I take my dogs in public, and when anybody takes their dogs in public, there's this scenario where, oh, my dog's friendly, and there's a lot of places where dogs are off leash or even on leash, And it's like, oh, well, if my dog's friendly, their dog must be okay with my dogs, but that's often not the case. And there's so many dogs, especially here, that are not dog friendly, and it creates really dangerous situations. And so I just want to encourage, like, when you're in public, please, please, please don't let your dog approach another dog. It's super impolite for the dog and for the owner, no matter how excited they are. And it creates, you know, anxiety in your dog and with the owners or other people, and just kind of can lead to a difficult situation. So
how can you minimize or reduce like that thing of dogs running up to each other? Because it can happen at parks and things like that.
Personally, and I think this is, you know, something that would be good for everybody to exercise, is I expect my dogs to ignore other dogs in public. If another dog comes up to them, if they're off leash, I expect my dogs to ignore them until I give them permission to say hi and greet the other dog.
Right.
And then that way you don't have a dog that's pulling on the leash or nervous or just overstimulated by all the other animals that are around. And it's really healthy for them because they get to have that time engaged with you. And dogs love work. They love being like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then when they get that reward, it's so much better for them, and more exciting.
So it comes down to owners having control of their animals, so the owner's dictating when the dog approaches another dog, and vice versa. So if you have an owner here with dog A and an owner over there with dog B, and both of them have control of their dog, so they can talk to each other. Is your dog okay? Yep. And then they can both give the command.
Exactly.
That's the ideal scenario.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. She stole your mark. That's funny. Okay. So now we're going to talk about behavioral adjustment. So the different methods you can use to adjust behaviors in your dogs. I want to say right off the bat, the most important thing is timing. If you're going to reward your dog, or if you're going to punish your dog, or remove a reward from your dog, you need to do it within literally 2 seconds. It needs to be super, super quick. You got to get in there quick and either reinforce or punish a particular behavior. Or the dog isn't going to understand why you're doing what you're doing. It needs to be fast, you need to be onto it. So if you're going to interrupt a behavior, like if your dog has a problem with peeing inside or pooing inside, and you're wanting to interrupt that with a loud noise and a clap, you need to be watching that dog carefully so that you catch the behavior and you do it right when the behavior happens. If you come back 2 hours later, your dog's peed on the couch, and you start screaming at it, and you're doing all these crazy things to your dog, it's just going to get scared and confused. It's not going to understand what's going on. It's not going to understand why it's being punished. So please don't do that. Really work on the timing. So Olivia, can you tell me, please, about some of the methods that you use to positively reinforce your animals, the animals that you're training?
Well, the first thing I start with is usually these guys, so treats.
Nice.
Okay, first of all, disclaimer, some dogs aren't,
they're not foodies.
They're not food motivated.
Yeah. Which
is okay. So you can find things like, is your dog work or play motivated? Like border collies typically enjoy working more than they enjoy the reward of good boy or good girl, or here's a treat, or here's something to...
So the job in itself is like a reward for them. Yeah.
For other dogs, they love a ball or a stick, like throwing something for them. So that kind of engagement. And then my girls particularly, they are food motivated, which is probably one of the easiest, that and toy motivation to work with. And then lastly, also just positive body language and words of being like, good girl, you know.
Attention.
Yeah. That's a huge reinforcement for them. They love it. They love it more than anything.
Right. So we need to understand the motivation for the dog, whether it's food, attention, toys, or getting to do a particular task or job. And then once we understand what they are motivated by, then we can use that particular thing to reward them, right?
Exactly.
I know that there's people that use whistles or clickers. I actually tried to train my cat using tongue clicks, and it kind of worked. How does that work with the clicker? Can you explain that?
The clicker is a tonal cue. Basically, if I were to have Cleo come over and I asked her to sit, as soon as she sat, I would give her a click and then a treat.
So the click and the treat go together?
Always comes before the treat, so click, treat.
Click, treat, okay.
But it's almost instantaneous, and then they start to associate the sound of the click with a good behavior or a behavior you want them to do.
Right.
So when you're clicker training, hypothetically, and I do this with my girls, I could put a bunch of toys in a room, And you can lure a dog in on a certain toy by using click. So when they look at the toy, you click, treat. When they walk towards the toy, you click, treat. When they pick up the toy, click, treat. And eventually you can get them to start retrieving the toy without saying anything at all. And
so
then,
the click becomes a reward.
Exactly. But also, when you don't have your clicker, you can use verbal cues. So mine, so good girl, that can be a verbal cue. Mine is yes. So as soon as my dogs do the behavior that I want them to do, yes, and then treat.
And you're consistent with that tone and that word.
Exactly, it's the same thing.
So even if you don't have the treat on hand, you could say yes, and then they
good girl, good job, and rub her down or something. And then they understand, oh, I did something that she wanted me to do.
So it's just like the Pavlov's dog scenario where Pavlov trained his dog with the whistle, right?
I think it was a bell. So Pavlov's
with the bell. It rang the bell whenever he fed the dog, and then eventually the dog would start to drool
when he heard the sound of the
with
bell.
or without the food, right? Classical conditioning.
Exactly.
So when you guys see trainers or you yourself are using a clicker, you can understand how it works and why you're doing it.